Hey guys, hello again and welcome back to our next training workshop. In this workshop, I'm going to show you guys how we can create CRUD services for our entities and how we can control the flow of data between our service contracts and our domain explicitly as that data flows in and out of our system. So to kick this off, we're going to start off from where we left off in the previous workshop, where we've modeled out a very basic domain with orders, order lines, products, a product category, customers, and address. And we can just double click on our services designer and we can head over to creating some new services for example, the order. And we can do this by just dragging our designer a little bit down over here, just so that we can get into some free space. I just use the middle mouse click button if you've forgotten how to do that. And we can right click in on the diagram here, and I can say, let me create some CRUD CQRS operations. Now, you'll notice that there's another option over here for CRUD traditional services. I'll be showing you guys both of these options as part of this workshop. So let's click on the CRUD CQRS operations. It's going to ask us which entity we'd like to do this for. I'm going to type there the order and say enter. We're going to leave all of these as default. The one thing that we can do here is we can, of course, change our diagram, but we can also create a new diagram as part of this. This is great if you want to separate services into different diagrams, just to make it easier to consume this information and to keep different parts of the system separate when we're viewing how things fit together. All right, so let's go ahead and say done. We'll leave all the defaults there. And we can see here that it's going to create us a create order, delete order, an update order, a get orders by ID, and a get orders query, which is going to return us a collection of order DTOs. And I can just drag this down a little bit just to separate it from my customer services. And the one thing that we can do is we can control how the flow of data is going to move between these commands and our order, and we can do that very very easily. And we can do the reverse for the order DTOs and how this data flows back. And I'll show you that in a minute. So the way we can see the flow of data here is we can right click this relationship. This is a create entity action relationship, and we can go and click on the a map entity creation. By the way, the shortcut here is control space. That's a hugely useful shortcut to keep in mind when you want to do mappings. And we can go and view now how the command, this create order command, contracts the data from this will actually flow into our order entity, our aggregate root that is the order. And we can see here that it's going to set an order number, date, the customer ID, and the status. And we could look at this now and we could say, well, actually, this doesn't really make sense. We don't want to set the status. This is not something that the front end will decide. This is something that's actually all orders must start with the same status. Maybe that's the status of placed. And so I can adjust this contract by pressing delete, and this will remove the mapping, and pushing delete again, which will then remove the actual property. And now we can see here that it is asking us to specify this. That's because this is a required field to create our order. So we can just populate this, and this is just free text now. I can populate this with whatever I want as long as it'll compile, and we can place here the order status, which will be placed. Okay. Next, we could decide, well, when I create my orders, and this is all going to be driven by how you're going to interact with your application, possibly through the front end, but we may want to create all of our order lines in one go. And so to do that, we can just double click on the order line, and that's going to create us a property with a collection of DTOs. And if we double click this again, it'll go and populate that DTO with all of the fields that we could possibly want or that are just available for us over there. And this is really a great way for us to project out the contracts based on where the data will flow into. So this makes things very, very quick for us to model out how everything is going to fit together. And you can see that we've got a lot of control over what this creation is actually going to do. So let's go ahead and say done for that one. Next, we can do the same for the update. So we can once again right click. This is the same shortcut, by the way, control space, but we'll just click it for this time. And you can see here, once again, we've got the flow of data coming in that when we update this, it's going to update the order number, the date, the customer ID, and the status. And when you think about an ordering system, it really doesn't make sense that any of those get set. So we can just remove all of those by just selecting them all. By the way, if you just click at the top here, hold down shift and click at the bottom, it'll select them all. And we could say delete and delete again, it'll remove all of those fields. But when we update, maybe we want to make it so that you can, in fact, update the order lines. And that's the only use case. And we may want to put in some validations at one point to make it so that you can only update your order before it has shipped, for example, depending on the capabilities of our system. And so if we want to be able to update these order lines, we can just double click that like we did for the create, double click it again, and that'll go set up all the fields over there. And now we can go and adjust the product, the units, the price, the discount. Maybe you don't want to be able to set the discount. There are certain things you want to be able to control and things that you don't. And this is really how we can see how that flow of data is going to be applied. And we could say done. So that's going to set up the orders the commands for our orders and how the flow of data is going to move in and out. Next, let's focus on how we're going to retrieve data out of our system, focusing on the order over here. So you can see that both our get order by ID and our get orders query return the same DTO. The one is just a collection and the other is not. And if we hold down control, this is a very useful shortcut. If we hold down control and we click on the type there, it's going to highlight it inside of our tree view over here, which is the model. And if we expand this, we can see the actual fields that are going to be retrieved from our domain and how those fields are going to be retrieved. Now, one thing that we can do is, once again, we can go and edit this mapping. So there's the control space shortcut. So that's just something I'm pointing out because as you get more familiar with the Tent Architect, using these shortcuts to navigate your way around will really speed things up. And you can almost be spending very, very little time having to right click, click, right click, click. You can actually just use shortcuts and move around the system very, very quickly. I'm a huge fan of shortcuts, by the way. So here we can see, by the way, when I click on the map from domain, we can see what fields are going to come in, but we can also expand this. We can say, well, let's go and include some information. Just going to hold down Shift and push the down arrow key. I want to include the name, the surname, and the email address. I'm going to push space. That's going to set the select over there. I can then navigate down and say, well, I'd also push space bar again, like to include the order lines, and I can push enter, and that's going to apply this mapping for me over here. And here you can see the additional fields that we added just a minute ago. There's our order line DTO. And we can do the same thing. And now I'm going to use the shortcut, Control Space. We can see here that it's going to fetch out all of the information for the order lines, but maybe we'd also like to include some information about the product, like the name and the description, for example, of this product. And we can say done. And that's going to add those two additional fields there. Now we've got AutoMapper installed. So AutoMapper is the technology that's going to turn this intent that we've described here, this design intent that we've set up, it's going to turn that into real code that'll compile and flatten out these DTOs and essentially denormalizes information from our domain for us. All right. The one thing that you guys may have also noticed over here is that we do have a warning in the system. And if we click on this warning over here, it's going to take us to where that warning is. And we can also just click on this warning over here, and it's going to give us an option that if we click on it, it's going to take us to where the warning is. And this is actually in a mapping. And what you can see it's warning us about here is that when we went and changed our domain for the customer and we added in the delivery address, we actually said that the delivery address, unlike the billing address, is mandatory. It's required. And so this is giving us a warning that's telling us we actually haven't set the delivery address. And because we haven't done that, most likely if we were to run this application and actually try and create a custom, we would probably get some kind of an exception to say that we have violated some aspect of our domain, right? And so we would want to set these, but we'd probably want to set it for the billing address too. So let's go ahead and double click the billing address. That's going to set up the billing address DTO and populate that. And we can do the same for the delivery address. And so now when we create our customers, we're setting both addresses at the same time. In this case, by the way, the billing address is still optional. That is already projected based on the fact that the billing address is optional in the customer in the first place. All right, so we can say done. And now you can see all of our warnings have disappeared. Now, the last thing I want to do here is I do want to go and these commands and these queries that we created just a minute ago, these have nothing that can trigger them at this point. Now, we could trigger them from other commands. For example, we could trigger them from the bus. But in this case, just to keep this simple, we could decide we want to trigger these from an HTTP endpoint. And so you can see there's even a suggestion over here. These suggestions are hugely useful. So if you see one pop up, you can take a look what it is and you can click and see whether it's something that you would like to do. But here it's asking us whether we'd like to expose this as an HTTP endpoint. We can say yes, please. And we can see exactly how it's being exposed over here. And we can go and modify this, change our verb if we need to. But this is perfect for now. And we can go and also do the other way around, which is to select all of these and we can do them all at once and say expose as HTTP endpoints. And now all of these are exposed. Okay. And we can say save. We can run our software factory execution. And this is going to now realize the designs that we've put forward. It's going to realize that in our architecture as we described it. So we're going to get all of our commands, our handlers, our validators. You can see here that it's going to be updating our create customer command handler. If we double click that, we can take a look at what's going on there. There we can see the delivery address and the billing address coming in. You can see the null checks also being applied. Of course, that's very predictable. It's very repetitive code that we would have had to write. So this is really just using the deterministic systems leveraging those deterministic systems to automate this code for us. I do suggest pausing the video at this point to go through this code. A nice way to do that, by the way, is to apply these changes, and we can open up the code base and open up the SLN file, and we can go through this code inside of the code base, directly from Visual Studio, and we can see how everything fits together. Now, one thing I can also just show you guys here, which is quite key, is that we can also view the code and what code is connected directly from Intent Architect. If we right click any particular piece of metadata, we may be curious what code is connected to this metadata. And this is something that Intent Architect does really, really well, is it connects you to the code base via this Open in IDE feature, where if you hover over it, it'll show you these are the files that are associated with this particular piece of metadata. And here you can see that it's connected to the command, the handler, and the validator. And if we click on this command handler, it's going to open it up in our solution over here. So if we click on our solution, you can see it's opening it up for us. Just give it a second. And the reason I wanted to open up this one in particular is because this is where we did some free text mapping. And you can see here that this free text mapping has not automatically imported in this import. And so it's just offering us to import that. And that's because whatever free text we put in the Intent Architect's not really aware what you've connected it to. It could be something outside of Intent Architect's awareness. And you would just need to, for example, set the variable or bring in the import. But a very simple thing for us to just very quickly do. All right, guys, the last thing I want to show you is I want to show you guys how we can use traditional services. So once again, let's go and right click on the diagram. I'm now going to select the CRUD traditional service, and we can do this for the product in this case. We can leave all of the defaults as we did earlier. We can say done. And what this is going to do in contrast, and this is really why I wanted to show this to you guys, because now we can see the two paradigms in contrast. This is really a services paradigm where you have different operations on a service, and this is a CQRS paradigm where we have commands and queries. Ultimately, they can achieve the same thing. So if we take a look at the services, these operations on the service, you can see that they are, for example, in the create product. And if we right click this relationship, we have the same level of control. We can see that there's a name and a description that's coming in from our create product DTO, which is a parameter on this particular operation that's going to be passed in to our product when we create these products. And so we've got that same level of control that I showed you guys earlier. And we can go lay this out however we choose. I, by the way, would also like to expose these as HTTP endpoints. So let's go ahead and do that. And now we can see here that all of these are exposed the same way as we did with the CQRS operations. We can say save, Software Factory will run, and we will now have a service that is exposed via a controller. And once again, I suggest pausing and taking a look through how this code is being generated, how these patterns are being realized in this architecture that we've set up through the modules that we've got installed. So we can say apply changes, and all of that goes now in the code base. And the last thing that I want to just show you guys here is that we can also use other accelerators. So these options over here are what we call accelerators. These are just JavaScript functions. You can actually create your own through the module building ecosystem. So if you're wondering if you can control this Intent Architect ecosystem programmatically, the answer is yes. You can do that through these accelerators. It's very, very powerful. Lots of our users really love to do that. And that is something that we will cover in later workshops. This is some other accelerators that can be very useful is, for example, we could look at our get orders query. And maybe our get orders query right now, there's no filtering on it, but let's say that in a system that you do want to have maybe an admin view of all of the orders, like for example, the back office view, you may want to be able to fetch out all of your orders and filter them. But we want to be able to, for example, we want to be able to, for example, not have to pull out all of these orders at once. There could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of orders, and we certainly want to paginate them. So let me just show you how we could do that. So we can right click on this, and you'll see that there's a paginate option over here. This is an accelerator, and if we click on that, what that's going to do now is hovering over, we can see that it's going to return us a page result of order DTO. And we can see also over here that the page number, page size, and order by, which is a string, by the way, that connects to our domain via a dynamic link. If you're wondering how that is realized in this architecture, this is going to allow us to pull out these page results really quickly and make it very easy for us to just enable that kind of a pattern. Similarly, for the find products, I could right click here and I could say paginate. And once again, now my operation will have a page number, page size, and order by, and also return a set of page results for these product ETOs. If we say save, run the Software Factory execution, we'll now end up with some shifts here. So you can see there's quite a few shifts. We can take a look at, of course, how the handler is now shifting to a paginated view, right? With some options over there in terms of order by, which is going to apply the order by. This is using that dynamic link that I mentioned earlier. And we can go ahead and say apply changes. And now what we can do is we can come back to the code base and we can run this from a code base perspective, and we will end up with our Swagger UI exposing out all of these endpoints, right? So let's just let that launch up. And just jump to the other monitor over there. So here we can see all of our different endpoints being available to us. One thing that we can do is we can actually hit these endpoints. For example, we can go and create ourselves a product here. We can call it my product, and we can execute that. There's our 201. And this is because we've got that in-memory database, and you can spend some time here playing around. We can go fetch out a page here. Give me the 10, and I'll just say execute. And there's our page with a single data set. Of course, if we created one or two more of these products and we executed that, there we can see our data set coming back, our page data set coming back. So guys, play around with this API, pause the video here, or at least this is where the video is going to be ending. So you can go play around with this API. In the next video, I'm going to show you guys how we can take these services one step further, create things outside of the CRUD realm, and how we can really customize things just that bit further. All right, guys, till then, cheers.